I think we've only suffered the tip of the iceberg with the recent mortgage failings. We have a greater moral problem that runs and cuts deep to the soul. And here's the thing, as we begin this series, change begins when you and I decide that we're going to do something about it. Next week I'm going to be talking about the letter of Birmingham. Chuck Colson said that the letter of Birmingham, written by Dr. King on some toilet paper in the Birmingham jail, was the most distinct, powerful message about law that was ever written by somebody who wasn't a lawyer. The profound thing that I have discovered about Dr. Martin Luther King was he knew that the civil rights movement, by the way, which began here, it began where we're going to serve next week in Chester, where he pastored during college. The conversations from table to table, where that library, where that park is, where we're going to pick up trash, for that beautiful statue of Dr. King, that's where this whole argument began. So you're part of history. He said the law is unjust because it's violating natural law, the law of God. And he honored the law so much that he was willing to break the law and suffer the consequences of the unjust law in opposition to overturning the law. And you see, that's how change happens in our lives. When you and I sit back and say, this is unjust, somebody needs to speak for these people. Someone needs to stand up and make a difference. We're in an election year, and it's going to be a bloodbath. Can you not see it? Anybody watch the debate last night? Uninformed people. Okay, here's the thing that I got for the 40 minutes that I watched. By the way, Bill Clinton made the most profound political statement ever in the history of mankind when he said, "Is the economy stupid?" Okay? It's about jobs. It's about how can I pay my bills and feed my family. And what did I see for 40 minutes? They were talking about gay rights and contraception to a bunch of guys who had 6 and 7 kids. Apparently it was a problem to them. Okay? That's what I saw for 40 minutes last night. And I'm like, excuse me, there's more important issues at stake here. When I'm asked to speak in corporate America as a community leader, what is the number one thing that they corporate executives say, would you please talk to my people about?
Integrity.
Integrity. Quit stealing office supplies. Quit using the copier to run off flyers for your kid's soccer tournament without asking. Those are the issues. As a young executive, in the early 90s, I went to a meeting with a group of people in my industry. We were talking about how do we capitalize on NAFTA. There was a zone in Mexico along the border areas where U.S. companies were actually granted rights to build factories and treat them as if they were in a zone that they were American, but have all the benefits of the low-cost labor. And we were unpacking all that. And we, at the same time, I went to another symposium talking about how do we, with the wall coming down in Eastern Europe, how do we go in and buy up these older factories and convert them over to capitalism? There was one common denominator, and it was our ethics only translate to the culture. What do I mean by that? Your personal ethics don't matter when it comes to going to Mexico to their culture, because their culture says 50% of my income is coming from graft, payoffs. The only way you build a factory in Mexico is you take an extra $100,000 cash and you go in and you spread the money around. That's how you get things done. Is that ethical? No. You want to stop that? Yeah. You go to the politicians and the policemen and the union workers and say, you want a building in your town? You want jobs? We're doing it the right way. But no, that's not what the corporate American executives were saying. Let's go and use situational ethics to get the job done. Can I tell you something? 7 out of the 8 the guys that I was meeting with were Christians. Members of Willow Creek. Members of Brooklyn Tabernacle. Men that I new, who are devout believers in Christ, talking about applying moral relativism to their personal lifestyles. You see, how can we, and everybody has a bit of blame here with the problems that we're facing in this crisis. You know, yeah, the politicians are corrupt and they've done stupid things. And they need to be accountable. Yeah, there's a lot of greed on Wall Street. There's a lot of greed in banking. People were raped, pillaged, and plundered. And John Q. Public sits back and saying, when it comes to blame. And you see, if we want to make a difference in this world, what do you believe? And how are you going to act upon it? And how are you going to live out it? And how are you going to speak? There's going to be consequences. Are you willing to take a stand for your personal beliefs? And if we don't, the world has no hope. We saw in a series or two ago that the only way that people are going to see that we're really truly devoted Christians is the love that we have for one another. And if we don't practice that, they have no hope of seeing that we're believers. And if you come to church and say, I'm giving God my hour on Sunday morning, and then go live like the devil the rest of the week, however you so please, the world's going to say, to your Jesus. That's why they love Jesus and hate the church. It's all interconnected. There's a couple verses. There's one in Romans that Paul said it this way in Romans 1. For although they knew God, this is speaking of believers, they neither glorified him nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of an immortal God for images made to look like mortal human beings and birds and animals and reptiles. Therefore God gave them over to their sinful desires of their hearts, to sexual impurity, and the degrading of their bodies with one another. And they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshiped and served the created things rather than the Creator. In Judges, it says this in Judges 17:16. In those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did what is right in his own eyes. That's moral relativism. That's the postmodern world. You're okay, I'm okay. It's about tolerance. I have no right. Hey, if there is no moral absolute, if there's no absolute standard that you're banking upon, as Professor George said from Princeton University, who's the professor of jurisprudence at Princeton, he said, if there's no moral absolute, and if you're basing it upon your personal integrity, then everybody's personal integrity is, everybody has their own opinion. And that's part of the problem that we're publicly clamoring for here. The world is sitting back saying that, hey, we just need more laws. We just need more... Jason, this is ringing up here in my ear. Here's the issue that troubles me. We have the natural response to the problem is more legislation, if there are no more absolutes. And the problem with legislation is there are always loopholes. It just makes it doesn't make it morally wrong, it just makes it illegal. That's a problem. That's a problem because all it creates in our society is finger pointing. We have got to understand that we're living in a pluralistic society where there's multiple beliefs, multiple worldviews going on, even within the church. And that for the greater part of society, we have abandoned moral absolutes and become moral relatives, where it's every man for himself. It's your own personal beliefs. I'll give you some case study on this. We can go deeper on Thursday night. let me read this out of Chuck Colson's book. Part of what the feeling of ethical crisis today is prevailing cultural relativism, or what Del Tackett calls the silly mind game that we play in order to conceive ourselves that truth is ultimately springs from me. It is the selfish nature of man that desires nothing more than to get his own way. Tackett, who formerly served in George H.W. Bush's administration, he went on to demonstrate how relativism has turned to societal covenant, where everyone must abide by this philosophical thing that we call tolerance. If I don't tell you what you're doing is wrong, then you don't tell me what I'm doing is wrong, and that's how the covenant works. We think that, therefore, we can get our own way without restraining, without guilt, without condemnation, Tackett said. He currently serves as the chief spokesperson for Focus on the Family's Truth Project. To say something is wrong is to break covenant. To say there is an absolute truth is also unacceptable. Eric Metaxas, the New York Times bestselling author of The Amazing Grace and Bonhoeffer, also observed this concept of truth that is openly mocked. If I talk about truth with a capital T, I may as well have declared myself a jihadist who will cut off your head if you do not do what I say. Most people, when they hear the word truth in our culture, immediately the walls go up because to say that's your truth, and it makes me uncomfortable fundamentally. Many are conceived that by their own heart or their own conscience is the source of moral authority. Rather than looking to God or even reason, is why many people are turning to Oprah, Dr. Phil, or just to look inside, as John Stonehill of Summit Ministries said. But the telling someone to look inside is telling someone to find themselves out of the wilderness using a compass that always points to them.